Three young singers who soared to the heights of show business on the current rock and roll craze were killed today in the crash of a light plane in an Iowa snow flurry.
On February 3, 1959, 13-year-old Don McLean was getting ready for his newspaper delivery route. He opened the bundle of local Standard Star papers, and there it was, a shocking headline that would change music history. Ritchie Valens, often hailed as the forefather of Chicano Rock, captured audiences with his iconic single La Bamba, an arrangement of a traditional Mexican folk song. Tragically, Ritchie's promising career was cut short just 8 months after his breakthrough at the tender age of 17. But before we delve into that fateful day, let's explore the early life of Ritchie Valens and his rise to fame. Richard Stephen Valenzuela, known by his stage name Ritchie Valens, was born on May 13, 1941, in Pacoima, a neighborhood in the San Fernando Valley region of Los Angeles, California, United States. From a very young age, Ritchie was encouraged by his father to take up guitar and trumpet lessons. He grew up listening to Mexican mariachi, flamenco guitar, as well as R&B music. Music was in his blood, and by the age of 15, Ritchie had mastered the guitar and taught himself to play the drums. At just 15 years old, Ritchie experienced a significant event that would haunt him for the rest of his life. On January 31, 1957, the Pacoima mid-air collision occurred when a Douglas DC-7B transport plane collided with the Northrop F-89 Scorpion jet trainer over the San Fernando Valley. The resulting crash caused debris to fall onto the playground of Pacoima Junior High School, where Ritchie was a student. By a stroke of fate, Ritchie was not at school that day because he was attending his grandfather's funeral. This event left him with recurring nightmares and a debilitating fear of flying. Despite his fears, Ritchie eventually had to confront this fear due to the demands of his rising music career. While at Pacoima Junior High School, Ritchie often brought his guitar to school and played for his friends after classes. Because he was such a good player, a local band named the Silhouettes invited him to be the band's guitarist. When the group lost their main vocalist, Ritchie stepped up and led the band. His first performance with the Silhouettes was on October 19, 1957. Soon, everyone in the San Fernando Valley was talking about Ritchie's talent. The news reached Bob Keane, the owner of Delphi Records. After attending one of his gigs, Keane invited Ritchie to audition at his home in Silver Lake. After one session, Delphi signed him on May 27, 1958. Within days, Ritchie recorded and released Come On, Let's Go and Framed, which became a success. Encouraged, Ritchie and Delphi created the double A-side record with Donna and La Bamba, which became Ritchie's breakthrough songs. The record sold more than 1 million copies, and the Recording Industry Association of America awarded him a gold disc, and Ritchie's career skyrocketed. Keane helped the rising star book numerous venues and gigs throughout the U.S., leading Ritchie to drop out of high school in the fall of 1958. By the age of 17, Ritchie was performing on The Dick Clark Show and had achieved considerable fame. Following his fall success, Ritchie participated in the Winter Dance Party tour that began on January 23, 1959, along with 5 other emerging music legends: Buddy Holly, The Big Bopper, Dion and the Belmonts, and Frankie Sardo. They performed in many American cities. But there was a major problem. The Winter Dance Party tour became known as the Road Trip from Hell because of the severe cold. They were loaded into old buses, 4 of which broke down twice due to the freezing weather. The players had to pack and unpack their own equipment in unheated buses to go from gig to gig. At one point, the cold got so bad that one of Holly's drummers, Carl Bunch, froze severely and had to be taken to the hospital. The tour slowly exhausted the young musicians. Tired from traveling in these old buses, Buddy Holly chartered a plane from nearby Mason City, Iowa, to Fargo, North Dakota on February 2nd while they were in Clear Lake, Iowa, where they performed at the Surf Ballroom. Fargo was near Moorhead, Minnesota, where their next performance would be. This way, Holly would have time to do laundry and get a good night's sleep for the first time since the tour began. They called Dwyer Flying Service and chartered a 3-passenger 1947 Beechcraft 35 Bonanza from Mason City. But before Holly and his 2 other band members could be driven to Mason City Municipal Airport, they made some changes. J.P. Richardson, also known as the Big Bopper, was down with the flu, so future country legend Waylon Jennings decided to voluntarily swap places with him. According to the stories, Buddy Holly teased Jennings by saying, "Well, I hope your old bus freezes." Jennings responded with, "Well, I hope your old plane crashes." Richie had enough of the cold and broken down buses. Despite the fear of flying, he flipped a coin with another one of Holly's band members, Tommy Alsop. Richie won the toss and said, "That's the first time I've ever won anything in my life." In 2010, Dion DiMucci of Dion and the Belmonts revealed a remarkable fact about that night. He claimed he was the one who flipped the coin with Tommy Alsop, not Richie. When Dion realized he would have to pay $36 for the flight, the price his parents paid for a month's rent at the time, he gave his seat to Richie. So instead of chartering the plane with his two band members, Buddy Holly was going to fly with the Big Bopper and Richie. The three stars were driven down to Mason City, and they arrived at the municipal airport at 12:40 a.m. CST, where their assigned pilot, Roger Arthur Peterson, met with them. At the time of the flight, pilot Roger A. Peterson was 21 years old. In April 1958, he obtained his commercial pilot's license with a single-engine land aircraft rating. By that time, Peterson had logged 711 flight hours, 128 of them in the Beechcraft 35 Bonanza. He had worked for Dyer for a year. Although he had 52 hours of instrument flight training, he had no instrument rating and had recently failed his instrument flight test, despite passing the written exam. 15 minutes after they met, the pilot and his three passengers boarded the plane and took off at 12:55 p.m. CST. Roger Peterson had received several weather briefings from the Air Traffic Communications Service, ATCS, before the flight. However, these briefings were incomplete and did not adequately inform him of deteriorating weather conditions, including an approaching snowstorm with heavy gusts. Before taking off, Peterson again asked the ATCS via radio for the latest weather information. He was told that visibility had decreased to 6 miles and the ceiling to 3,000 feet, which was generally considered safe to fly, but did not account for the approaching storm. After takeoff, the plane reached an altitude of approximately 800 feet and made a left turn in a northwest direction. Dwyer immediately asked Air Traffic Control Service to contact the pilot, but they could not get a connection. Concerned, Dwyer started a search for the Beechcraft 35 Bonanza at dawn. At about 9:35 a.m., they found the plane. It had crashed about 5 miles northwest of the airfield, with all 4 occupants losing their lives instantly. By the time rescuers arrived, the plane and passengers were covered in snow. The 3 passengers had been thrown from the wreckage, and the pilot was found in the cockpit. The Civil Aeronautics Board, the precursor to the FAA, investigated the crash. They found no structural or engine failure on the plane. The storm was far away, so they concluded that the crash happened because the pilot entered an area where it was completely dark. Although the plane was properly equipped for instrument flight, Peterson misread the pitch altitude because he was not familiar with the specific type of pitch indicator on the plane. The 21-year-old pilot had taken instrument flight instruction using different pitch altitude indicators than those in the Beechcraft 35 Bonanza. In an area of total darkness, Peterson had to rely on the altitude indicator, which only confused him. Spatially disoriented in total darkness, he lost control of the Bonanza and brought the plane down instead of up. The plane crashed into the ground at a steep right bank and nose-low altitude. The right wing of the aircraft broke off, while the 3 passengers were tossed from the aircraft. Airplane parts were scattered over a distance of 540 feet from the crash site. When they read the airspeed indicator, the needle was stuck between 165 and 170 knots. The tachometer indicated 2,200 revolutions per minute, and the ascent rate gauge showed a descent rate of 3,000 feet per minute. The 3 passengers, including Richie, who was the youngest, died of fatal head injuries and blunt trauma to the chest. February 3, 1959, became the day that would later be remembered as the day the music died. After the bodies were recovered, they were all given separate funerals. with J.P. Richardson and Buddy Holly buried in Texas and Richie in California. Richie's remains were buried at San Fernando Mission Cemetery in Mission Hills, California. When Richie's mother, Concha, died in 1987, 28 years after the plane crash, she was buried in the same spot as her beloved son. The music notes to La Bamba and Come On Let's Go are displayed on their tombstone. Inspired by the life of Ritchie Valens, Columbia Pictures released La Bamba, a 1987 biographical drama about his short-lived career. At the site of the crash, there's a signpost with a giant replica of Buddy Holly's glasses, which were found at the crash site decades later. The Surf Ballroom in Clear Lake, Iowa, where the three musicians last performed, has a giant stone monument commemorating the tragic passing of Ritchie Valens, Buddy Holly, and the Big Bopper. Richie pioneered the Chicano Rock and Latin rock movement, inspiring artists like Los Lobos, Los Lonely Boys, and Carlos Santana. He will forever be remembered as the first Latino to cross over into mainstream rock during a time when very few artists of Mexican heritage could do so. Richie adapted traditional Latin American music for the rock stage, and popular singers of all generations later adopted his formula for success. In 2015, Billboard named him among the top 30 most influential Latino artists in history. He was posthumously inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the California Hall of Fame, and the Rockabilly Hall of Fame. He is also one of the youngest artists to get a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Despite a career that spanned just a few short years, Ritchie Valens left an indelible mark on the music world. With timeless hits like La Bamba, he not only paved the way for Latino artists in rock music, but also inspired countless musicians across generations. His legacy endures, reminding us of his groundbreaking contributions and the vibrant spirit he brought to the stage.